Hello and welcome back to the Smash Archive, the series where we look at every series represented in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. In a previous video, we looked at all the series to have originated prior to the existence of the NES and Famicom. So, as a natural follow-up, why don't we look at some of the NES's big one-off games and smaller series that started on the system. For this video, we'll be looking at series that either consist of only one or two games for the NES, or a series that started on the NES, but either don't have enough content in Smash to warrant their own episode, or can't be easily grouped together with other larger universes that are represented in the game. We'll also be ignoring third-party games, as I plan to give the third-party series in Smash their own videos, grouped together by companies similar to the Sega video I've done for this series. With that out of the way, let's get started. So surprisingly, there's actually some representation for the NES itself, or more specifically its Japanese counterpart, the Family Computer, or Famicom for short, which released in June 1983, 2 years before the NES released in America, and 3 to 4 years before the NES was brought to PAL regions. Since this is the only console to be represented in Ultimate, unless you count the Game & Watch series, we don't have much content focused on just the Famicom in general. First is the music track Famicom Medley, a retro medley consisting of music from various NES and Famicom games. Specifically, the track contains the title theme from Zelda 1, the temple theme from Zelda 2, Fever from Dr. Mario, Brinstar's theme from Metroid, the title theme from Duck Hunt, the jogging theme from Punch-Out!, and the Underworld theme from Kid Icarus. In addition, there's Spirit number 1127, Discoon, a 2-slot ace support spirit with the effect Zap Floor Immunity. The mascot for the Famicom Disk System, an add-on exclusive to Japan which allowed you to play games on disc cards, which could hold 3 times the storage of regular Famicom cartridges and the ability to save games, with the add-on also allowing for better audio capabilities. In addition to a lineup of games exclusive to it, some games that released as regular cartridges on the NES were actually disk system games in Japan, such as the first 2 Zelda games and the original Metroid. The Sports series was effectively a label given to various sports games on the NES in America, with all the games either being made by Nintendo, or at the very least, Nintendo funded the US release of the games. So while these are technically separate series, not only is there not much to say about these games other than just being NES representations of certain sports, but other series with similar labels that we'll be talking about later are grouped together as if they were from the same series in Smash. So I figured to just group these games together as the Sports series. The only thing taken from this series is 4 spirits. Number 1116, Pitcher and Batter, a 1-slot novice support spirit which lets you start the battle with a Beast Ball. These being based on the playable characters in Baseball, which was the first game in the Sports series, releasing in December 1983 on the Famicom, October 1984 in America, and in 1986 both released in Europe and received a disk system version in Japan. Number 1117, Tennis Player, a 1-slot novice support spirit with the effect Landing Lag Down. The player character in tennis, which released the following January in Japan and was a launch title for the NES in America and Europe, with the game receiving a disk system version in 1986. Number 1129, Volleyball Player, a one-slot novice support spirit with the effect Stamina Up. The female playable character from Volleyball, which released July 1986 for the Famicom Disk System and 1987 everywhere else. And number 1132, Hockey Players, a one-slot novice support spirit which lets you start the battle with a freezy. The character's from Ice Hockey, which was the second to last game in the sports series and the last one to be developed by Nintendo, releasing in 1988 across all regions. Similar to how the sports series was primarily just a label used in America to denote games in the sports genre, the Light Gun series was a similar label used to identify games that required the system's light gun accessory, the NES Zapper, in order to play them. 9 games ended up receiving this label, although for our purposes we're only interested in the first 3. Wild Gunman, which prior to the NES released as an FMV arcade game in the mid-70s, Duck Hunt, which was based on an electronic toy Nintendo released in 1976 called Beam Gun Duck Hunt, and Hogan's Alley, which was the first fully original light gun game, with it being named after a real-life shooting range. There's actually a good amount from the light gun series, albeit the majority of content comes solely from Duck Hunt, as it's easily the most famous light gun series game due to it being a pack-in title with the NES alongside the original Super Mario Bros. First, we have fighter number 59, Duck Hunt, or Duck Hunt Duo in Europe. This being a team-up of the dog and a blue duck from Duck Hunt, along with an off-screen third member being a person using the NES Zapper, seen in-game with red targets representing where they're shooting. Whilst the 2 main characters in the team are from Duck Hunt, some of their moves actually come from other light gun series games. Next is the stage Duck Hunt, which is a recreation of the main screen of the game, specifically being based on Game A, which is where 1 duck appears at a time, and Game B, where 2 ducks appear at a time. The black bars on the side of the stage is based on the NES's 4:3 aspect ratio, compared to most modern consoles which are 16:9. During the fight, ducks will fly in, which, whilst having no actual impact on gameplay, if they're hit, points are added to the score tally seen in the bottom right corner of the stage. If enough points are scored, the game advances to the next round like the original game, with the points and rounds getting reset if either enough points weren't scored or after 10 rounds. In addition to being able to stand on the bush on the right and the tree on the left, fighters can also stand on the 8-bit dog when it rises after each set of ducks, either showing off the ducks that were hit or laughing if no one managed to hit any ducks before they fly away. Finally, a patch of grass occasionally pops up in a random location, hiding both fighters and items. After that, we have 2 music tracks. A Smash 4 Duck Hunt medley, which in addition to various sound effects, contains the title theme, Duck Hunt or Game A and B intro, Duck Hit jingle, and the Round Clear jingle. And a new Duck Hunt medley, which contains the title theme, Duck Hunt or Game A and B intro, Duck Hit jingle, Perfect jingle, the score count sound effect, Miss jingle, clay shooting or Game C intro, and the Game Over jingle. Finally, there's 3 spirits. Number 974, Duck Hunt, or Duck Hunt Duo in Europe, a fighter spirit, where unlike the fighter, the spirit art features the more common black and green duck. Number 975, Wild Gunman, a 3-slot advanced primary attack spirit, this being a general representation of the various Outlaw enemies from Wild Gunman, with all 5 of the Outlaws appearing in both Duck Hunt's Down Special, as well as appearing prominently in their final smash, NES Zapper Posse. And number 976, Gangster, Lady, and Policeman, a 1-slot novice support spirit which lets you start the battle with a Rage Blaster. These being the different cardboard cutouts in Hogan's Alley, with the player needing to shoot the gangsters but not shoot the lady or policeman, with the gangster cutouts also appearing in Duck Hunt's final smash. Balloon Fight was originally released in arcades in 1984, with it then receiving its much more famous NES port a year later, with Balloon Fight also being one of the first games to be led by Satoru Iwata, who would go on to be the 4th president of Nintendo from 2002 to 2015. The game itself focuses on flying around an arena with you needing to pop the enemy balloons and then kick them off screen, and then just keep going until you eventually die. The game would later receive both a Game & Watch port as well as a DS remake, which was only available to Japanese Club Nintendo members and replaced the game's main protagonist with Tingle from the Legend of Zelda series. In addition, there was a side-scroller spin-off for the Game Boy called Balloon Kid, which released everywhere except Japan, with Japan later getting an enhanced version called Balloon Fight GB, as well as a Famicom port which replaced the game's characters with various Sanrio characters, the company who owns Hello Kitty. Given this is often viewed as one of the classic NES games almost everyone familiar with that system knows, we do have a good amount of content from Balloon Fight. To start, we have the stage Balloon Fight, which has 3 possible layouts. One with light green grass, which seems to be a recreation of Phase 2, one with orange grass resembling Phases 4 to 6, and one with dark green grass resembling Phases 7 to 9. In addition to each version having different platform layouts, there's also different layouts for obstacles, namely lightning clouds and flippers, with the orange and dark green grass layouts also having small stalactites on the bottom of some platforms, which can be broken by attacking them. Flippers appear in Phases 7 to 11 of the original game, which when touched causes the flipper to start spinning, where it will then cause players and enemies who touch it to start flying uncontrollably in a certain direction. In Smash, it instead just does minimal damage. Every once in a while, the clouds will shoot a spark of electricity that bounces off platforms and does damage on contact in both the original game and Smash. By walking off screen, fires will wrap around to the opposite side of the stage, matching Balloon Fight's looping screens, with this gimmick being exclusive to this stage and Ultimate's version of the Mario Bros stage. Finally, there's a body of water at the bottom of the stage, which unlike most bodies of water in Smash, can't be swam in, most likely due to the water being an instant kill hazard if fallen into in the original game, and by going near it, fires have the chance of being bitten by a large fish, which was an instant kill hazard for getting too close to the water in Balloon Fight. In Smash, it's possible to escape the fish by mashing buttons. Next is 3 music tracks. A Smash 4 medley, which in addition to having ambient sound effects play throughout, contains the Game Start jingle, enemies dropping music, eaten Fly Fish jingle, New Life jingle, Bubble jingle, A Small Part of Balloon Trip, Stage Clear jingle, the Game Over theme, and the perfect bonus jingle. As well as 2 versions of Balloon Trip, the music that plays during the side-scrolling side game listed as Game C, as well as bonus rounds, with both a Brawl remix and a Smash 4 remix. To end off, there's 2 spirits. Number 1124, Balloon Fighter, a 1-slot advanced support spirit with the effect Jump Up. The game's main protagonist, who was first named Balloon Fighter in the English version of Smash Bros. Melee, where he appears as a trophy. And number 1125, Fish, a slotless advanced primary grab spirit with the effect Electric Weakness, this being the large fish who appears in the water mentioned earlier. Devil World is a maze game, with each round being split into 2 segments. The first needing you to eat all the dots around the maze whilst avoiding demons, with the player character only being able to eat dots and shoot fireballs to attack enemies while it's holding a cross, followed by needing to bring 4 Bibles in the screen's corners to the center of the maze. All the while, the maze is shifting positions thanks to orders given by the devil at the top of the screen. Whilst this game did see release in Japan and Europe, due to a rule Nintendo of America had which forbade the release of games that prominently feature religious imagery, the game has never seen a release in America, making it the only game to be created by Shigeru Miyamoto to have not released over there, with it also being Miyamoto's first game that was specifically made for home consoles as opposed to arcades, releasing almost a year before the original Super Mario Bros. Because of this unique history and release circumstances, we have a good amount to cover, albeit not as much as some previous series we've talked about. To begin, we have the assist trophy Devil, this being the blue devil who appears at the top of the screen to point which direction the maze will move, and is effectively the game's main antagonist. In Smash, his behavior is similar, with him flying to the top of the screen before pointing around to move the screen and blast radius, similar to how he points to move the maze. Then there's 2 spirits. Number 1118, Tamagon, a 1-slot novice primary grab spirit, the game's main protagonist who traverses the mazes in an attempt to defeat the devil. And number 1119, Devil, a 2-slot advanced support spirit with the effect Screen Flip Immunity. The spirit art comes from Smash for Wii U, where he was also an assist trophy. Urban Champion was Nintendo's first attempt at making a fighting game, with the game's design being heavily inspired by the Game & Watch game Boxing, or Punch-Out in America. Overall, the game is often regarded as being the worst game in Nintendo's original lineup for the NES, mostly due to the overly simplistic controls, with the only moves being move and punch. Given this incredibly negative reception, only one thing is taken from this game, that being spirit number 1120, the Urban Champion Fighter, a one-slot novice support spirit with the effect Fist Attack Up. The game's main protagonist who is entering all the street fights to become the Urban Champion, which requires winning 135 fights in a row. Clu Clu Land is a puzzle game where the player has to uncover gold ingots by swinging between pegs, whilst avoiding enemies and black holes. The game is a pretty simplistic high school style game, much like a lot of games from the early to mid 80s, with Clu Clu Land also being a launch title for the NES in America. Given that, we do have a good amount of content from this game. First is the music track Clu Clu Land, a brawl remix containing the level start jingle, the main level theme, the hurry up theme, the stage clear jingle, and the bonus round theme. Next is the item Yūyūki, these being sea urchin enemies that can be defeated by stunning them using sound waves and then slamming them into a wall. In Smash, by either attacking or throwing the Yūyūki, its spikes will extrude, causing it to stick to the floor or wall and damage any fighter who goes near it, except for the person who threw it. It's also possible to make the spikes retract by hitting it with a strong enough attack. And to end off, there's two spirits. Number 1121, Bubbles, a 2-slot novice support spirit which lets you start the battle with a screw attack. The game's main protagonist, who is a female bubblefish trying to recover the stolen treasures of the underwater city of Clu Clu Land. And number 1122, Yūyūki, a 1-slot novice support spirit which lets you start the battle with a Yūyūki. As mentioned earlier, this is the game's only enemy other than the black holes which can spawn more Yūyūkis. The Excite series is a series of off-road racing games which started with ExciteBots on NES, which, in addition to needing the player to win the race, also tasks them with making sure that their bike's engine doesn't overheat and also not to fall off the bike. In addition to a Japan-exclusive expanded version titled Versus Excitebike, being named after the game's arcade port, the game also saw a Japan-only Super Nintendo port featuring Mario characters, which released exclusively via the Satellaview add-on. After that, there was also a 3D spin on ExciteBike with ExciteBike 64, which released for the Nintendo 64 and was made by Left Field Productions, who otherwise seem to have mostly made various basketball and motorbike games before shutting down in 2011. Then there was two ExciteBike spin-offs for the Wii, with Excite Truck, which was also a launch title for the Wii in Japan, and released a year or two after launch everywhere else, and ExciteBots Trick Racing, which released 2 years later. Both of these games being made by Monster Games in collaboration with Nintendo, with Monster Games having mostly worked on various NASCAR games, with them also being involved with the 3DS ports of Donkey Kong Country Returns and Xenoblade Chronicles. However, since ExciteBots, the only things done with the series since has just been ports and remakes of the original Excitebike. Given Excitebike is one of the most famous NES games, as well as some variety being offered thanks to Excite Truck and bots, we have a decent amount of stuff here. To start, there's the music track Excite Truck, which is the result screen music from Excite Truck. Then there's two spirits. Number 1123, ExciteBike, a one-slot advanced support spirit with the effect Move Speed Up, this being one of the races from the original ExciteBike. And number 1245, Beetle, a one-slot novice support spirit with the effect Undamaged Speed Up. One of the vehicles from ExciteBots which has medium weight and grip stats, a high turbo length stat, and below average turbo power. Ice Climber tasks you with climbing up a mountain, with players only being able to jump to reach higher levels and break through breakable platforms and swing their hammers to fight off enemies, with each mountain consisting of 8 levels and a bonus area. The game is another pretty simple high score affair, with most of the challenge coming from the game's slightly awkward controls. The game was also the first Nintendo game programmed by Kazuaki Morita, who'd go on to be a programmer for both the Super Mario Bros. Trilogies and the first 2 Zelda games, with him currently being a programming director and supervisor for the Zelda series. Given the game is often considered a classic NES game, we have a good amount to cover. First is fighter number 15, Ice Climbers, this being a team-up of both the player 1 character Popo and the player 2 character Nana, with the default costume having the player control Popo, whilst Nana is controlled by a CPU that copies what the player does on a slight delay. Some of the alternate colours swap this, having the player control Nana and the CPU control Popo. Next is the stage Summit, this taking place at the top of an ice mountain which is presumably based on the mountain the ice climbers climb up in the original game. The stage is incredibly slippy due to being made of ice, with the peak including a few platforms featuring a similar design to the unbreakable platforms from the original game, as well as a sloped platform made of destructible ice, with cloud platforms matching the ones from the games also flying in from the sides. In the cave at the bottom of the stage, icicles can drop to deal damage to fighters, these being a hazard that appears in later levels. Eventually, the peak will start sliding down the mountain before landing in water, after which a polar bear lands on the stage, this being an enemy that forcefully scrolls the level up if the player takes too long, with him causing the bottom part of the stage to sink into the water. In addition to ice platforms floating across the bottom for players to stand on, if a fighter stays in the water for too long, they can get eaten by the fish from Balloon Fight. After enough time passes, the mountain reforms to its starting position, with this layout then looping, albeit with the polar bear already being on the stage before flying off when the summit starts sliding down the mountain again. Finally, if the food item is turned on, the vegetables present in the game's bonus stages appear as healing items. Then we have 2 music tracks, with 2 versions of the track Ice Climber, which combines both the bonus stage theme and the regular stage theme, with both a melee remix and a Brawl remix. finally, there's 4 spirits. Number 606, Ice Climbers, a fighter spirit. The spirit art being Popo and Nana's jump sprite. Number 607, Condor, a 1-slot advanced support spirit with the effect Strong Wind Resist. These appearing in the game's bonus stages, with the climbers needing to grab all the vegetables, then grab the Condor. Number 608, Polar Bear, a 2-slot ace support spirit with the effect Slow Super Armor. As previously mentioned, these are enemies mainly used to punish players for taking too long to climb the mountain. And number 609, Eggplant, a 1-slot novice support spirit with the effect Stamina Up. This being one of the vegetables that appears in the game's bonus stages and acts as the Ice Climbers series icon in Smash. When Nintendo were planning to bring the Famicom to America, there was one small problem. That being, after an oversaturation of video game consoles and low-quality games, interest in the home console market in America had reached an all-time low, this period often being dubbed the video game crash of 1983. Because of this, Nintendo decided that the best way to sell their console in America was to effectively trick people into thinking it wasn't a console and was instead just a toy. This was mainly done in 2 ways, by renaming the Famicom to the Nintendo Entertainment System, or NES for short, and by utilizing a toy robot that was going to be made a niche accessory for the Famicom to further push the toy angle Nintendo was going for, which, similar to the previously mentioned Light Gun series, the games that required the robot were dubbed as the Robot series. This marketing strategy ended up being successful and not only saved the video game industry, but made the NES the default leader of the 3rd generation of consoles, with a lot of this early success often being credited to the Robot series. Despite this, the series would only see 2 games. Stack Up, the packing game which has you send commands to the robot to pick up and move colored blocks, and Gyromite, where you need to collect all the bombs in a lab whilst avoiding enemies and getting the robot to open and close gates. Despite this, due to the Robot series' importance to the NES's early success, there's a decent amount of stuff from this series. To begin, there's Fighter number 42, Rob, the actual toy robot you would use to play the games. Rob standing for Robotic Operating Buddy. One interesting thing to note is that Rob is the only character to have a different default color depending on which language is selected, with it being his Japanese Famicom-based color scheme if set to Japanese, Korean, or Chinese, or his Western NES-based color scheme for every other language. After this is the Brawl remix Stack Up / Gyromite, which despite the title entirely consists of music from Stack Up, specifically containing the test mode music, which is the only track to appear in both games, the title theme, the memory mode jingle, the direct mode jingle, and the bingo mode music. To end off, there's 3 spirits. Number 822, Rob, a fighter spirit. The spirit art being a picture of the Western Rob units. Number 823, Stack Up, a 1-slot advanced support spirit with the effect Falling Immunity. This being a picture of Rob along with the colored gyro blocks he uses to play Stack Up. And number 824, Gyromite, a 1-slot advanced support spirit which lets you start the battle with a back shield. Similar to the last spirit, this is a picture of Rob with the spinning gyros he uses to play Gyromite, with these gyros actually appearing in Smash as Rob's down special. Mach Rider is a vehicular combat racing game set in the year 2112, after an invasion of Earth. The game focusing on racing through courses whilst avoiding and shooting the enemy invaders, with the game being split across 10 sectors, each having 2 tracks each, with the 2 main modes requiring the player to either get to the end of each sector without dying, or reach a certain distance within a time limit. Given that this game is somewhat obscure, with Nintendo eventually making F-Zero their main futuristic racing series, there's not much from Mach Rider. First, we have the music track Mach Rider, a Melee remix consisting of the title theme, the course theme, the course select theme, the course selected jingle, and the game over jingle. And then there's spirit number 1126, Mach Rider, a 1-slot novice primary shield spirit with the effect Speed Up. The game's main protagonist who is trying to find a new home after his hometown was destroyed by the invaders. The Mysterious Murasame Castle is a Japan-only game for the Famicom Disk System, featuring similar gameplay to the original Legend of Zelda. However, instead of being an open-world game within a fantasy setting, Murasame Castle is instead a more linear, action-based game set in Edo period Japan, with the goal being to get through the Murasame Castle, along with the 4 neighboring castles, to defeat the Murasame stone statue, which is possessed by an alien, fighting an army of ninjas and monsters on the way. Despite being a fairly beloved Famicom title, the only time the game has seen an official release outside Japan was via the 3DS Virtual Console release in 2014, 28 years after the original Famicom release, with the only acknowledgement to the game outside Japan prior being a copy of the game appearing as a treasure in Pikmin 2, a Murasame Castle mode along with the game's main protagonist Takamaru appearing in the Wii version of Koei Tecmo Samurai Warriors 3, and the game acting as the inspiration for one of the mini-games in Nintendo Land. Given this is one of the more popular titles for the disk system, we have a good amount of stuff from this game. To start, we have 2 music tracks, a Smash 4 medley consisting of the game start jingle, the Castle Town theme, Murasame castle theme, the bonus stage theme, the inside the castle theme, and the game over jingle. As well as Doshimen, this being the previously mentioned Castletown theme. Next is the assist trophy, Takamaru, the game's main protagonist who is a samurai apprentice. In Smash, he fights using the two attacks he had in the original game, these being an up-close attack with his katana and a projectile attack where he shoots 4 pinwheel knife rooks, with his fast and choppy animations being based on the simplistic animations present in most NES games. Then we have a Mii sword fighter costume based on Takamaru, with the sword being Takamaru's katana. Finally, there's spirit number 1128, Takamaru, a 2-slot ace primary attack spirit with the effect sword attack up. Interestingly enough, Takamaru was actually considered to be a playable character in both Melee and Smash 4, but both times he was scrapped due to being considered too obscure, hence why he's an assist trophy. Glory of Heracles is a series of RPGs based on Greek mythology, with the original game releasing exclusively in Japan for the Famicom in 1987. The game was developed and published by the studio Data East, the series also receiving 3 sequels, 1 on the Famicom and 2 on the Super Famicom, along with a spin-off for the Game Boy, all of which were also Japan exclusives. However, when Data East went bankrupt in 2003, the rights to the series were bought by a mix of Nintendo and Payon DP. Payon being mostly known for developing the Donkey Kong spin-off games King of Swing, Jungle Climber, and Barrel Blast. Afterwards, in addition to putting the Super Famicom and Game Boy games on the various virtual console platforms, they also made a 5th main entry for the DS, releasing in Japan in 2008 and becoming the first and so far only game in the series to release outside Japan in 2010. There's a decent amount of content from these games, however all of it is taken from the DS game, most likely due to it being the only one Nintendo was directly involved with. To begin, we have the music track Glory of Heracles, a Smash 4 remix containing 2 tracks from the DS game, Battle Theme 4 and Field 2. addition, there's two spirits. Number 1233, Glory of Heracles Hero, a 1-slot advanced primary shield spirit, the main protagonist of the DS game, an amnesiac boy who is trying to find the truth as to why they are immortal. And number 1234, Heracles, a 1-slot advanced primary attack spirit, this being the series' interpretation of the Greek hero of the same name, who was the main protagonist of the first game where he had to save Venus from Hades. The artwork comes from the DS game where Heracles is a party member who takes on a supportive role, with him also being a supportive character in all the other sequels except the Game Boy spin-off. The Famicom Mukashibanashi series, or Famicom Fairy Tail series in English, was a Japan-only series of text-based adventure games based on Japanese folk tales, with the series consisting of 2 games, which were both released in 2 halves for the Famicom Disk System. Shin Onigashima, which was based on both a mix of the stories of Momotaro and Princess Kaguya, and Yūyūki, which is based on the Chinese story Journey to the West. Whilst the games have been referenced a few times in other games, with Shin Onigashima having received a few Japan-only re-releases, it's pretty obscure elsewhere. Despite this, we do have a good amount of content from the series. First, we have 2 music tracks. Shin Onigashima Medley, a brawl medley consisting of the title theme, the at-home theme, and the neighbouring village theme. And Yūyūki Medley, a new medley containing the track's opening title, name entry, battle theme, meteor shower, Go West, Missing People, main background music, demo background music, Women Village, Parting Ways, and Ox Demon King Clear. Then there's 3 spirits. Number 1130, Dombe and Akari, a 3-slot advanced primary neutral spirit which can be enhanced at level 99. The main protagonists of Shin Onigashima, who go on a quest to save their adoptive parents' souls after the residents of their village were turned into Oni by a dragon. Number 1131, Dombe and Akari Shin Onigashima Kyohen, a 3-slot ace primary neutral spirit with the effect Stamina Up. This being based on their appearance on Disc 2, where Dombe is magically made older via a magic gavel. And number 1139, Goku and Chao, a 2-slot novice primary shield spirit. Yūyūki's main protagonists who are working to try and find each other after being separated, with Goku being based on Journey to the West Sun Wukong, whilst Chao is an original character made for the game. Famicom Grand Prix F1 Race is a top-down Formula 1 racing game released exclusively in Japan for the Famicom Disk System, with it later receiving a sequel, also exclusive to Japan, with Famicom Grand Prix 2 3D Hot Rally, which was an off-road racer with the camera being behind the player as opposed to above, with the 3D coming from how this game was compatible with the Famicom 3D system, a Japan-exclusive accessory compatible with 7 7 total games that let you play games in stereoscopic 3D, this being the same kind of 3D that would be used for both the Virtual Boy and the 3DS. Whilst Mario appears on both games' box art, he's mostly just there for marketing purposes, since outside of that, these games have nothing to do with the Mario universe, hence why I didn't talk about them in the Mario series video. But his inclusion has led some people to view these games as a sort of predecessor to the Mario Kart series. Outside of that connection, and the second game being the most famous to use the Famicom 3D system, these games are mostly forgotten, so we don't have much from this series. First, we have a Brawl remix of the title theme from 3D Hot Rally. Then there's Spirit number 1133, Monster, a 1-slot novice support spirit with the effect Braking ability up. One of the vehicles from 3D Hot Rally, which is the slowest but has the best off-road stat, with it being considered the beginner vehicle and the main vehicle due to it being the one on the game's box art. Famicom Detective Club is a duology of Japan-only text-based mystery games, where similar to the Famicom Mukashibanashi series, both of them were released across 2 discs. The first game, subtitled The Missing Heir, having you investigate a series of murders connected to the wealthy Ayashiro family, with the second game, subtitled The Girl Who Stands Behind, being a prequel set 2 years before the events of The Missing Heir, where you have to investigate a supernatural rumor surrounding the murder of a high school's detective club co-founder. Whilst both games saw a few re-releases in Japan, Western regions wouldn't get an official way to play the games until 2021, when both games received full-blown remakes for the Nintendo Switch. Given this is another text-based game, and is overall for a more mature audience compared to everything else we've talked about, only one thing was taken from the Famicom Detective Club series, that being Spirit number 1138, Ayumi Tachibana, a 1-slot novice support spirit with the effect Improved Escape, a girl working for the Yotsugi Detective Agency alongside the main protagonist and acts as the series' female lead. The spirit art comes from the second game, where she's a member of the school's detective club and was best friends with the murder victim the game's plot revolves around. The Nintendo Wars series, sometimes simply called the Wars series, is a series of strategy RPGs with the majority of the games being made by Intelligent Systems, the same studio behind both the Fire Emblem and Paper Mario series. The reason for the simple name being that the games used the naming convention of the system they were released on, followed by Wars. The series was initially Japan exclusive for the first 6 entries, with the 7th game, Advance Wars, being the first to release outside Japan. In fact, the Japanese version of Advance Wars was actually cancelled, with Japan not getting the game until 3 years later as part of a combo cartridge with Advance Wars 2. The series has seen a decent following, with the first 2 Advance Wars games even being set to get remakes for the Switch made by WayForward, the studio behind the Shantae series. The only thing taken from this series is 4 spirits, most of which are taken from the Advance Wars games due to them being the most popular. Number 1134, Tank and Infantry, a 2-slot advanced support spirit which lets you start the battle with a super scope. These being the most basic ground units that appear throughout the series, the art specifically coming from Super Famicom Wars. Number 1135, Andy, a 3-slot advanced primary grab spirit, the main protagonist of Advance Wars 1 and 2, and the most recognizable protagonist of the series, being a commander for the Orange Star Army. The art comes from Advance Wars 2 Black Hole Rising, where he works with the other characters to liberate the Orange Star Nation from the returning Black Hole Army. Number 1136, Eagle, a 1-slot novice primary attack spirit, a commanding officer of the Green Earth Army and the 3rd opponent in Advance Wars, first appearing in the game's 3rd mission, Air Ace. And number 1137, Olaf, a 1-slot novice primary shield spirit, a commanding officer of the Blue Moon Army and the first enemy in Advance Wars, with the art coming from Game Boy Wars Advance 1+2, a combo cartridge of the first two Advance Wars games exclusive to Japan, which, as previously mentioned, mainly exists due to those games not releasing in Japan beforehand. Mech Fight was Nintendo's second attempt at making a fighting game after the previously discussed Urban Champion, with the game releasing exclusively in Japan for the Famicom in 1993, with Nintendo's desire to give fighting games another go being due to the insane levels of success of Capcom's Street Fighter II, which released 2 years prior, leading to basically every company under the sun throwing their hat in the fighting game ring. Mech Fight having all fighters be robots consisting of a body and a floating head, pair of hands and feet. Given this game was not only a Japan exclusive, but was also released 3 years after the Super Famicom released, this is probably the most obscure game we're talking about today, hence why we don't have much from this game. First is the assist trophy, Sukapon, the game's main protagonist who is a comedy robot that was reprogrammed to be a combat robot to take down the game's villain, Dr. Walnut. In Smash, he attacks fighters with 3 of his special moves: Tondaka, which has Sukapon throw its head as a projectile, Sukapon Toss, a close-range grab and throw attack, and Sukapon Roll, where Sukapon charges towards enemies via a cartwheel-like spin. After that, there's Spirit number 1140, Sukapon, a 2-slot legend primary grab spirit with the effect Strong Throw. In the game, Sukapon is a tricky fighter whose gameplay revolves around trying to keep your opponent guessing what your next move is. This unconventional moveset most likely playing into how Sukapon wasn't originally built for combat. And those are all the smaller scale series from the NES and Famicom. In terms of the overall rankings for most represented, Urban Champion and Famicom Detective Club are both tied 153rd with 62 other series. The Famicom, Mach Rider, Famicom Grand Prix, and Mech Fight are all tied 109th with 40 other series. Devil World, the Excite series, and Glory of Heracles are tied 88th with 18 other series. The Sports series, Clu Clu Land, and Nintendo Wars are tied 73rd with 12 other series. The Robot series and Famicom Mukashibanashi are tied 62nd with the series Art Academy, Art of Fighting, Brain Training, Dylan's Rolling Western, Metal Slug, Nintendo Badge Arcade, No More Heroes, Panel de Pon, and Shantae, with the Robot series also being the least represented series to have a playable character, as well as the only series with a playable character that doesn't have a stage. Balloon Fight and the Mysterious Murasame Castle are tied 54th with Concept, Custom Robo, Galaxian, Nintendo Labo, Shovel Knight, and Virtua Fighter. The Light Gun series is tied 47th with Chibi Robo, Cuphead, Samurai Showdown, Tetris, Starfy, and Wrecking Crew, and Ice Climber is tied 45th with Nintendogs. As always, leave a comment if there's a particular series you want to see me talk about, or you feel I made a mistake somewhere, and thanks for watching.